Hey everyone, welcome to the investor.bet NRL round 25 betting preview. 3 rounds left to go in the season. In this video, I'm going to go through all 8 games this weekend, go through who I think is going to win and why, what I'm considering betting on in each of these matches, and break down why I'm going to consider betting on, and break down why I think that's going to happen. We're going to go through what the odds are, what the odds have been in their previous meetings, who's been covering, has it been going over or under, etc., to give you everything you need to make smart betting decisions this weekend. Also, on Thursday, the try scorer video has been going really well the past month or so, will be posted, so keep an eye out for that. Before we get into this weekend's games, though, it's going to be a really interesting round from a ladder perspective. We still have effectively 9 sides sitting in contention for the top 8. And Broncos, Knights, and Raiders all a couple of games out. It'd be really tough for any of those 3 sides to make it, but still a bit of movement to occur. Top 4 is still not fully locked in. Storm are 2 games clear, but below that, Panthers, Roosters, Sharks, Bulldogs, and Seagulls, all a chance still for the top 4. And then last weekend, so in round 24, was a pretty straightforward round from a betting perspective. But interesting from a total points perspective, 7 of the 8 games went under the total points line. The only game that went over was the Panthers versus Storm, which had the lowest total of the round at 43.5, and obviously finished on 46 points. Every other game, the total was around the 50-point mark, and all of them went under the total points line. So interesting there. You got to be cautious when they do set a lower total. And then also last week, home sides won 7 of the 8 games. Only the Melbourne Storm were the only away side to win last weekend. Home teams covered the spread in 5 of the 8 games. We check out the ATS records overall in the season. Home sides 96-84. Also underdogs 102-78. Favorites and underdogs split the covers last week for piece. 2 underdogs won outright. They were the Melbourne Storm and the West Tigers beating the Rabbitohs. That was my 1 underdog selection for last week. Like the more at the +6 than the money line, but they also were able to win the game outright. Now, looking ahead to this weekend's games, kind of not like the most excitingest round. No really good games. But it's going to shape how the top 8 looks to set. We'll start with the Thursday night matchup. West Tigers take on the Seagulls. And when we go through and analyze these games, we're using the bet finder. So we're not just making decisions based on, who should win or which team's better or worse, because, you can't make betting decisions based off that. Because if you just go who's better or worse, then of course the Seagulls are playing better than the Tigers, but, they're $1.19. They need to win by 15 points or more to cover the spread. So it's not just like tipping. And if you approach your betting like tipping, then it's going to be really hard for you to be profitable long term, which is what this is all about. And that's why I created this channel in the first place. So you need to be able to consider the statistics, consider the team's performances. Are they starting to improve their performances, or are they on the decline? And these are all the things that we look at using tools like the bet finders. This is all stuff you guys can use for yourself. I'll put the link in the description, but you can study the attack, defense, where their strengths are, where their weaknesses are, where, for example, if you've got 2 good attacking sides and 2 bad defensive sides going against each other, then it's going to be a high-scoring game, or vice versa. All these different things you can look at, and this is how you're able to win every single season. So this Tiger-Seagulls game, Seagulls have plenty to play for here. They're sitting just outside the top 4. Can't afford to drop this game. They've won the past 6 versus the Tigers. They've covered 2 of the past 3. I think they get over the line here, but I don't want to lay 14.5 points. If we look at the Tigers season overall, they've won 5 games. And overall this season, whenever they've won a game, they've won the following game. So they won last week against the Rabbitohs, which I just mentioned. And so other situations this year, back in round 15, they beat Gold Coast, and then the following week beat Canberra by 24 points. And then back in round 3, they beat the Sharks, and then the following week beat the Parramatta Eels by 1 point. So they have had this habit this year of putting back-to-back wins together. Don't think that's going to happen here. I think the Seagulls are too good, have too many points in them for the Tigers to win this game. I think the key for this game, and something that's really worked for me this season that I haven't actually done a lot of in seasons past, is playing these teams that should win, that are around this $1.20, $1.30 mark, and playing them with a try scorer. And it gets the $1.20 up to $1.80, $1.90, $2, and all you need is one player to score a try. And for example, if the Seagulls are going to win this game, then we're going to target a player to score a try that if that player scores, and I'm going to look to target a player where, if the Seagulls do win this game, then it's very likely that that player scored a try and contributed to it. And we'll cover that in the try scorer video, but that's something that's worked really, really well for me this season. From a total perspective at 51.5, I'd be leaning towards the overs in this matchup. Seagulls played in really, really bad conditions last week. Tigers, that Rabbitohs-Tigers game was always going to be a low-scoring matchup based on how the Rabbitohs' recent performances have had been. But I think this matchup sets itself up towards being a high-scoring game. We know Seagulls have plenty of points in them, and Tigers can leak points. But over the past 8 to 10 weeks, they've shown they're a higher scoring side, and I think that leads it towards being over 51.5 type game. Warriors at home against the Bulldogs. The Warriors have a really good record in this matchup. They've covered the spread in the past 7 and won 6 of the past 7. Bulldogs did get the meeting early this season, which was round 18. They won 13 points to 12. Bulldogs 7.5 point favorites here, total 43.5. I do think it's interesting we're getting $1.45 for the Bulldogs. They're clearly the better side and in better form. They've won their past 4, and then the Warriors have lost 5 of their past 6 games, with the only win being against the West Tigers. So Bulldogs should win this game, win it comfortably. This is the Warriors' last home game of the season. They're on the road against the Sharks next week and then have the bye to finish the season. So, there's that added motivation factor for the Warriors to show up for their last game at home. So I am really wary of that. So I'm not going to take the -7.5. But what I am going to do for this game, because it does have a real history of being low scoring. And if we look at the stats for these sides, they're ranked 11th and 10th respectively in points for, and neither side are high scoring in the first half either. And then defensively, the Warriors are ranked 8th, and the Bulldogs are now the #1 defensive side. You can see the least tries. They also require the most meters per point from the opposition and concede the least meters per play. So sets it up for a really low scoring game. So how I'm most likely going to play this game is taking the Bulldogs to win and pushing that total of 43.5, which is pretty low, but kind of in alignment with the past few meetings between these two sides. Push that up to a number closer to 50 and then take the under. With the Bulldogs being priced close to that $1.50 mark, we should be able to buy this number well up over 50.5 and then take the under on that. I feel like that's definitely the best way of playing this game from a main betting perspective. But like the Bulldogs to win and lean towards it being a lower scoring game. Broncos versus Parramatta. Broncos come off the bye. They're $1.35, -9.5. They need a win to keep their season alive. They face the Eels, who they have a really good record against. They've won and covered the past 3 versus Parramatta. Realistically, at home, they should be winning this game. However, I don't want to lay 9.5 points or take $1.35 about a side that's only won 2 of their past 10 games, and those games have been against the Cowboys and Knights. Hardly an ideal situation there, but I do really like the total in this game. 5 of the past 6 head-to-head have gone over. The total at 50.5 definitely is on the higher side, but I don't think it is quite high enough as to what this game should be. The Eels are just constantly involved in really high-scoring games, well exceeding the 50 mark. Last week against the Roosters, then the week prior against Parramatta was a 70-point game. 50 points against the Warriors, who, as I mentioned previously, don't have the numbers to set themselves up for high-scoring games. We put up 50 points in that game. 46 points against the Melbourne Storm the week prior, and then 40 points against the Gold Coast Titans the week prior to that. So just week after week there, right around that 50 or over mark. And then the Broncos in recent games, they put up 42 points against the Cowboys before the bye. Prior to that, conceded 46 against the Gold Coast Titans, conceded 41 against the Bulldogs, put up 30 points against Newcastle, then a 56-point game against the Dragons. So, they're also on that same track of constantly being involved in high-scoring games. So can definitely see this game being very high-scoring. Last time we met, it was 46 points scored. Prior to that, 64 points scored when they played at the Gabba in the corresponding match last season. Everything points towards this being another high-scoring game and going over that number. Brisbane should win the game. They still have that little bit of a chance of making finals, but obviously can't drop this game. Do think the -9.5 is too high though. I'd have this number more so. For Brisbane to be a bet, I'd need -5.5 and more so around the $1.60 mark for them on the money line. But at the current odds, I don't think there's any value whatsoever. Raiders versus Panthers. Penrith, big favorites here, -9.5, $1.34 on the money line. They have won and covered the past 5 versus Canberra, so they do have a really good record. Dropped their game last week against Melbourne by 2 points. That snapped their 5-game winning streak and kind of also put them a little bit back towards the pack for that top 2 spot. Gives the Roosters and the Sharks just that little bit of a chance of securing a top 2 spot and a home qualifying final. Probably is, unlikely for it to happen, but, both those sides, if they keep on winning and Penrith drop a game, then it's a chance. So Penrith do have to keep winning. It's kind of my point of what I'm saying there. As I said, they have a really good record in this matchup and they should be winning. Going to be without Nathan Cleary. Lineups, as I recall, this aren't out yet, but they have played a lot of this season without them. So I don't think it's going to hurt them too much. Against Canberra, Penrith put up 53 points in round 5 last season, 26 points in 2022, then 36, 30, and 28. So they have a history of putting up big numbers against them. So I'm looking towards their team total for this game. I think there's going to be a bit of an overreaction with Cleary being out, and then we can capitalize on that. Also interested in the full game over 46.5. 12 of the past 17 between these two sides have gone over. Penrith, their defense hasn't been as good as it was in previous seasons and also as it was earlier this season. So earlier this season, teams were really struggling to get to the 20 mark against them. But in the past couple of weeks, Storm put up 24, the Eels put up 34, Newcastle, who are the worst, I think worst or second worst attacking side, put up 14. Dragons, for another bad attacking side, scored 10. Dolphins, 26. So the Raiders can put some sort of attack together, that could contribute to the over. The only issue is they only put up 4 points against Cowboys last week. However, that was on the road. They're back at home now. Last time they were at home, they scored 24 points against Manly. Prior to that, at home, 32 against the Rabbitohs, 20 against the Warriors. So they passed through at home. They have been hitting that 20-plus mark. I think if they can score that 14 to 16 points, then the Panthers can contribute the other 30. So kind of the ways I'm looking at playing this game, like Penrith to win and leaning towards the over. Could take Penrith by the total down as well. As I mentioned, this has been a really profitable strategy for me this season on the NRL. So I'm looking at doing that as well on this game. But expect Panthers to win and lean towards it going over the total. Storm versus Dolphins. Melbourne, $1.17, -14.5. They won both matches so far against Redcliffe. Round 16 this year and round 12 last season. They put up 24 and 30 points. Won those games by 6 points and then 8 points in the other one. You notice here Melbourne were a 4.5-point favorite early this year and a 6.5-point favorite last season. At home now, you expect that number to go up because both of those games were in Brisbane. But up to 14.5, I feel like is a pretty big jump. Now, you obviously have to factor in they're coming off a win against Penrith last week. They consistently win week after week. And the Dolphins aren't really in the best form. They've lost 4 of their past 5. They only win a 2-point golden point win against the New Zealand Warriors. So Redcliffe hardly coming to this game in good form, but I still think the 14.5 is too high of a number. This season, like Melbourne haven't been winning games by big margins, and they're now 2 games clear on top of the ladder for that minor premiership. And, I think that takes a little bit of the pressure off. They, no matter what, just realistically only need to win 1 more game to secure a top spot. With them winning that game last week, really sets up the rest of their season to have that top spot. Now, the Dolphins sit 1 game outside of the top 8. If they can get a win, which they've been struggling to do recently, then they can kind of force their way into the top 8. There's still definitely a genuine chance. Sharks are favourite to beat the Dragons on Sunday. And the Dolphins have a much better points difference than the Dragons at 15 compared to -92. So they only need to finish on equal competition points, which they're currently 2 behind, so 1 game behind. Obviously, I don't think they're going to go down to Melbourne and win this game, but I think they can definitely keep it close and give them a shot. So I'm leaning towards the Dolphins at the plus 14.5. I do think they can cover that number with that added motivation to close out the season strong. If we look at the final couple of games for the season, the Dolphins play next week against the Broncos. That's definitely a winnable game for them based on how the Broncos are traveling. And then the final game of the season, they play the Knights. So, they could realistically, they don't need to win this game and win their next two, but obviously don't want to be blown out dramatically. And if we look at the Dragons, and next week they play the Eels, so realistically should win this game. But then the following week play the Raiders. So they're obviously winnable games. They do need the Dragons to probably lose on Sunday against the Sharks. But regardless, kind of went off a bit of a narrative there. Dolphins, I think, can keep this game close, mainly for the reason the Storm aren't blowing teams out. They'll likely just do enough to win, and plus 14.5 is a really big number in the NRL, and I think the Dolphins can cover it. Rabbitohs versus Newcastle. The Knights minus $5.5, $1.50, total 47.5 as it currently stands. This is a game I'm not really that excited to bet into. Rabbitohs won 3 of the past 4 versus Newcastle. Knights won the most recent matchup in round 25 last season, 29 points to 10 as a 4.5 point underdog. And the Knights have also covered 4 of the past 6 versus Rabbitohs. Newcastle's hopes of making finals kind of slipped away, hence why coach complained in the post-match press conference last week with that loss to the Sharks. With that loss, they realistically can't make top 8 as they're going to need the Dragons to lose pretty much all 3 games, and they're for and against at minus 90 really doesn't set them up well at all. So, both sides effectively just playing for pride now. Guess the Knights probably are still clinging on to some sort of a chance, however, just very, very unlikely. For this game, Newcastle, I'd slightly lean towards them winning, but I don't want to lay 5.5 points. My preferred way, if I had to bet in this game, which as it currently stands, I'm probably not going to, is just taking either side to win by 1 to 12 points. I feel like, of the games this weekend, this is one that genuinely feels like it could go either way. And if we got the Rabbitohs, plus 6.5 or pushed out to the plus 8.5, then I'd consider backing them. But, not aside, at the beginning of this season, if you go back to the season preview, the Rabbitohs were the one side that were expected to finish top 4 that I predicted would miss the top 8 this season. So I'm kind of been fading them all season, which has been really profitable. But, if they're getting plus 8.5, I think they could cover that against Newcastle. But overall, I think it's a game where either side 1 to 12 is probably the best betting option. With the total at 47.5 as well, I do think that number is slightly high. At that number, I'd lean towards the unders, as this game, how these teams play, especially the Rabbitohs recently, just consistently being involved in low-scoring matchups. They've lost their last 4. Pretty much all of them have been low-scoring and would have all gone under 47.5 total points. And for the Knights, they're obviously another side in bad form. They've lost 4 of their past 5, and all bar one of their games, and all bar one of their past 4 would have gone under. The only game that would have gone over was against the West Tigers, which was a high-scoring game. They put up 34 points. But Knights are a side that struggled to score. Rabbitohs are bad on both sides of the ball. So, everything sets up towards it being a more so unders. Titans on the Gold Coast take on the Roosters. Roosters big favorites here, minus 15.5, $1.19 to win the game outright. Roosters have won the past 10 versus Gold Coast, so they realistically, should be winning this game. If you look through when they met in round 21 last season, 36-18, 44 points in 2022. Then going back prior to that in the finals, they won by 1 point. So Roosters, should be winning this game. Total at 53.5 is a big number. The past 4 between these two sides have gone over. Roosters consistently involved in high-scoring games, largely on the back of their really good attack, which is currently number 1 in the league. They put up 38 last week against the Eels, 40 against the Dolphins, 34 against Manly. Then were held to 8 points by the Storm. Prior to that, 42 against the Dragons, 40 against the West Tigers, 26 against the Bulldogs, who are now the number 1 defensive side. So everything points to the Roosters racking up a score here against this Titans defense, who does concede a high number of points. If we look at them overall in the season, ranked 11th, conceding 24 points. So Roosters can definitely rack up a number here. We're going to have a team total well over the 30 mark, which doesn't really set it up all that well. If I had to bet into this game, I'd lean towards the Roosters to win and taking the minus 15.5. But this is another similar game to the Seagulls game, on Thursday night, where you can look at the Roosters and look at their try scorers and double that up with them to win outright. They're definitely not going to drop this game, and I think they're going to rack up a score. So I can't see this being a low scoring game. So their centers, wingers are going to get plenty of opportunity to cross line, especially for the Roosters, the wingers. And so there's going to be able to build those odds up. So once try scorers are out, once team lineups are out, then I'm going to be able to go through and pick which try scorers I want to take for this game. But expect the Roosters to win well, and I still think they probably do cover the 15.5. But the try score is probably going to be the better option in this game. With the total at 53.5, it is higher than the past 5 totals we've seen for this matchup. So there has been that adjustment made. So that's why I'm just that little bit hesitant towards taking the full game over as the other option for this game. But yeah, Roosters still have plenty to play for, pushing for a top 2 spot. And obviously they need Penrith to drop a game. And Titans come into this form of back-to-back losses against Sharks and Dragons. Then final game of the round, Dragons at home to the Sharks. The Sharks have a really good record in this matchup. They've won the past 8 versus St. George and covered the past 3. They're $1.61, -3.5 for this game. Cronulla come in on the back of 3 wins. They got over Newcastle in Golden Point last week and beat the Titans and Rabbitohs in a couple of weeks prior to that. So back on track. They're still playing with backup halves and still getting wins on the board. The Dragons are a very inconsistent side. They win one, lose one, win one, lose one. It's kind of been the pattern for the past couple of months. Still clinging on to a spot in the top 8, which kind of no one really expected. The Dragons were favorites for the wooden spoon at the start of the season, but dramatically exceeding expectations. Against the Sharks here, I think Sharks win, and they're going to be my bet in this game. At $1.61, I'd prefer to take that than laying the 3.5 points, but it's not a bad number by any means. I think they do probably cover that. The Sharks just kind of have a habit a lot of the time of winning games by small margins. But this is one where I feel like they could probably cover that number pretty comfortably. Last time they met was round 9 this season. The Sharks won 20 points to 10. Last season, when the Sharks were at home as well, 52 to 16. Their last time playing at a Dragons home game, the Sharks won 40 to 8. That was round 4 last season. I would lean towards the Sharks winning and covering that margin. 6 of the past 9 head-to-head have gone over at 48.5. I do think that number is too high, so I'd be leaning towards the under. I feel like it can kind of change the trajectory. A lot of these previous games that went over relied on the Sharks putting out 40 and 52 points and 36 points back in that game when it was only a 34.5 point total. So the Dragons have struggled to score. Sharks are very, very good defensively, and I think all signs point to them winning this game and closing out the round with a win and continuing to maintain their spot inside the top 4. So I'll recap the selections for each game. Tigers, Seagulls going Manly to win, and interested in the overs there. Also will be taking try scorers in that game for the Seagulls. Warriors, Bulldogs, like the Bulldogs to win, and also the game to go under. Will be buying the total up higher. Broncos versus Eels, like the over 50.5 points. Raiders versus Panthers, like Penrith to win, and also like the overs in this game, or Penrith's team total to go over. Storm versus Dolphins, like the Dolphins at the plus 14.5 to cover that number. Rabbitohs versus Knights, not really keen on this game at all. Lean towards either side to win by 1 to 12. I feel like it can be a close game either way. Like the Roosters to beat the Titans, we'll also look into their try scorers later in the week. And if I had to pick, I'd lean towards the minus 15.5 there on the Roosters. And I'm not one that really loves those big lines. And then final game, Dragons versus Sharks, like the Sharks to win and cover the 3.5 point line. But if that game does a bit of money come for the Dragons, we get $1.70, $1.75 for the Sharks, then I'll be taking the Sharks just to win the game outright. All those plays are posted in the bet finders. That's also where you get access to all the different tools I use to research the games and make profitable bets every single week. So I'm not just, guessing based on my knowledge of the teams and the NRL in general. We use statistics, use those analytics to determine the team performance and also expected performance for this game. So hopefully that's what I've passed on to you guys through doing these videos all season long, and it's changed your perspective of how you're approaching your betting so that you can actually win every single season. Because betting on the NRL, is way more fun when you're winning on it as well. You look way more forward to the games and the season every single year. So thanks guys for watching. Make sure you subscribe. We keep on posting those videos for round 26, round 27, and then right through the finals. It's going to be very, very interesting final series. There's still genuinely 5 teams that I believe can win the premiership this year. I don't think it's definitely not as clear cut as we've seen the past few years with the Panthers dominating the competition. And so I'm really excited to keep on previewing these games for the YouTube channel here. So appreciate you guys watching. Use the bet finders this week, next week, the week after, and see how your betting on NRL changes and your results improve straight away because of doing this. That's what so many people have been able to experience and send through messages of, what's changed with how they're analyzing the games now and getting those results. That's really good to hear, and it is the reason why I made it available and stopped just using it for myself for the past 10 years or so. So with that being said, hope you guys have a great weekend. Keep an eye out for the try score video that'll be out on Thursday this week. Obviously, as I'm recording this, lineups aren't out yet, so as soon as they're out, then I'll update them in the bet finders. You'll see the try score trend, see all the players, and also where teams have been scoring and conceding their tries this season. So chat to you guys soon.